Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. As you are getting logged in here, you're going to see a quick poll pop up, and this is really just to solve our curiosity. We'd love to know, how long have you been working with Veeam products? Love to get a sense for how many of you are brand new to Veeam and how many of you have been here for quite some time. So when you get a second, fill out that quick poll. We're about to get things started here. We appreciate all of you making the time. I think you're going to find the next hour to be extremely beneficial, as we've brought both Chelsea and Lydia. So you've got two of our technical success managers here to not only go and answer just some of the best practices, give you some of the best configuration tips and tricks, but they're also here to answer your questions. So throughout the entire time, throw your questions into chat, or excuse me, into the Q&A function there. We'll try to answer those in real time as much as possible, but we also have left some time at the end to go through any questions that might remain. So again, this hour is tailored for you. We want it to be beneficial, so please bring your questions. We want to make sure we get those things answered for you. In the meantime, looks like we do have some pretty long tenured Veeam customers here. So 4 to 6 years, nice to see you here. Thanks for sticking with us. And then welcome to all of the brand new Veeam folks. With that, I'm going to turn things over. We're going to get things started. We'll dive into the content. And so with that, we'll be kicking off Lydia and Chelsea's portion here. Over to you.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Lydia, and I work in the Technical Success Department here at Veeam. And today, as Zach said, I am joined by my lovely colleague here, Chelsea Gash. So together, Chelsea and I and the wider team, we have onboarded many organizations of different sizes, and we are very excited today to share our knowledge with you all. So Veeam Data Cloud is a unified platform that really simplifies data protection. And whether it's across M365, Entra ID, our hosted storage solution called VDC Vault, Azure, and Salesforce. And I think this is the beauty about Veeam Data Cloud, because whether you're an enterprise-based customer or a smaller sized organization, Veeam Data Cloud scales to your needs. Today, however, Chelsea and I will be focusing on Veeam Data Cloud for Microsoft 365. And whether you have activated your account or whether you have some backup jobs created and have got some questions for us, in this session today, we will cover topics that matter most as you are getting set up. And some of these topics are covered in the user guide provided by Veeam. However, today, Chelsea and I will go beyond that and share some real world context with you all, together with some pro tips. Okay, so today we will go over activation, configuration, and enablement. And we will do that through a demo lab and a Q&A session at the end. However, first, we will begin with some onboarding considerations. And before Chelsea goes ahead with the demo lab, let's cover some pre-onboarding steps. And these include, familiarizing yourselves with the portal, the SSO, the MFA options available to you, and understanding how to engage support and gather essential information for your activation and configuration phase. Right, so after purchasing Veeam Data Cloud, your primary licensing administrator will receive an activation email. And this activation email will direct you to the Veeam Data Cloud portal, which is found at cloud.veeam.com. And Chelsea will show you all in just a bit that this is where activation and configuration of your tenant happens. Generally speaking, this is when you should be creating your Veeam account on my.veeam.com if you don't already have one. And within this portal, and you guys that have been at Veeam for longer, the ones of you who have got other Veeam products will know that within my.veeam.com, you can assign case administrators and allow your wider team members to log in and manage support cases. And I personally love my.veeam.com because this is the portal where you as a customer, you have got a lot of power in terms of escalating your support cases. So if you need to ever escalate a support case, you can always click on the button over there of talk to a manager and escalate your case. Under the sign up button, you can also register or log in using social accounts as well. Good stuff. So for anyone wanted to enable SSO or MFA, these are enabled through the Microsoft authentication natively, or under my.veeam.com, you can enable MFA on your account as well. And it's just located under your profile under settings. And when you log into cloud.veeam.com, you will see on step number 4 that you are presented with 2 options. So you can log in via Microsoft. As long as you are using your UPN, you will be able to log in. Just please make sure that you are a user under cloud.veeam.com first, okay? And when you do try to log in via Microsoft, this will natively use Microsoft's SSO or MFA option, depending on what you have configured under your account. And similarly, you can log in via Veeam. And again, if you have enabled MFA under your Veeam account, it will prompt you to log in via MFA. Now, before activation, I think it's very important that you understand your overall Microsoft 365 environment, because this will definitely help you plan and predict any license usage, especially if you are looking to back up the entirety of your tenancy. And maybe you have a larger tenancy, and if you want a faster first backup, it's good to know and understand your tenant first, because especially for that first backup job, Microsoft is going to throttle the data no matter what you do. And it's important for you to know that, because it will affect your first backup run. Of course, there are other factors, including the number of mailboxes that you have, the sizes of those mailboxes, OneDrives, SharePoint sites, and of course, there can also be API contention if there are any other tools running against those Microsoft 365 APIs, okay? And to help with planning, there are a couple of tools that you guys can use and a couple of things that you guys can do. And one of these is running the Insights tool that's under my.veeam.com. It's on the right-hand side under products, and you can choose your region. If you're in the EMEA region, you of course can choose EMEA, or APJ, okay, depending on where you are. And if you do have a larger organization, a larger tenancy, and you want more details, you can also head over to admin.microsoft.com, and you can check over the heavy usage reports. And some of our larger customers, they decide to typically separate the heavy users, heavy sites, heavy OneDrives from the main backup job. And what you can do typically is you would export, the usage, the information from your reports, and based on the size of that data, you will separate those, mailboxes, OneDrive, etc., into a completely separate policy. And this is really just to help with that initial first ingestion, because after this, what most customers do is they tend to put all the backup jobs that they have created and that they have separated into maybe the main backup job, or maybe into the main 2 or 3 backup jobs. Okay, but Chelsea is going to show you guys all of this in more detail when she's going to go over the configuration and activation process. So one very, very, very common blocker during the activation and during the app registration of your tenant is the conditional access policies. Now, if you do encounter a block, just like the one that we have on the screen right now, you can identify the cause in your Entra ID admin center. And this is where you can check in your sign-in logs and see which conditional access policy is blocking you. And so now that we have covered some pre-onboarding tips, let's move on to the demo lab and walk you guys through the activation and the configuration, and also some enablement as well. Chelsea, you are up. I'm going to pass over the share functionality to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So just want to run through a little bit of enablement on the cloud.veeam system itself, along with the Microsoft 365 tool and how you would add your tenant, how you would create and configure those backup policies. So when it comes to onboarding your tenant and your profile, the first thing you're going to need to do, as Lydia mentioned, is log in to the cloud.veeam system. So once you have logged in with either your Microsoft credentials or your my.veeam account, you'll get into the main overview page, and whatever subscriptions you have with the Veeam Data Cloud tool will show active here. So you will see the full suite of products available to you. So if you do want to inquire with any of the products, you'll have that request product demo option as well. So one of the first things you want to do is look at your roles and your permissions. So to do this, this is in this top right corner. You have the little cog settings symbol, and you want to go to users and roles. So to invite users, they must be within your tenant with the same domain. So it is a single domain access platform. And how you would do that is invite user, and then you can add your email address into this section. What you can do once you've added your email is then specify role type. So if you want them to be a full organization admin, you have the predefined admin role. If you want them to be view only, you have your view only role as well. What you also can do is a work level access. So in the work level access, you have the option to add role. There is multiple predefined roles that you can use. So they include things like restore activity, restore operator, backup operator, and that will limit the permissions the user essentially has within the portal. You can edit the permissions for users at any point. So if you do want to, for example, change a admin to a view only, you can come into your settings at any point, edit those users, and then specify what role type you want. What you can also do, as well as the predefined roles, you can create custom roles. So custom roles are beneficial for things like if you want a specific user to only be able to specifically access data for a single group within your tenant, or you want to limit the permissions to them so they can see certain backups, not others, or view settings but not manage backups. Little one-off situations where you may want to just limit those permissions a little bit more. To do so, you would come into here, you would see all your predefined roles, and then you can click this create role button. You can choose one of the templates that will essentially allow you to use one of the predefined roles and then change the permissions slightly, or you can start from scratch, and it is as simple as giving it a name and then ticking on and off what permissions you want that role to have. When you hover over each permission as well, it will give you a brief overview of what that permission is going to do. When it comes to the roles themselves, like I said, you can come into here, you can specify. You can also specify the tenant. So if you are a multiple tenant organization and you have different admins managing different tenants, when you invite that user, you can go to that work level access and you can specify the tenants they have access to as well. Going back to the overview page, there's a few different things on here that will be really helpful for you. So the first thing is direct links to the my.veeam account. So your support cases and subscriptions, click on either of those, it's going to get you to that my.veeam account. You'd log in with your Veeam account at that point. You then also have resources. So we have the user guide on here, which will give you direct link to our Veeam Data Cloud user guide, the forums, which are really handy for things like feature requests. And then you have your product demos and knowledge base here as well. So some useful links for you when you are onboarded onto the system. So also on this overview page, you've got your dashboard and activity. So if we come into the dashboard, once you have onboarded your tenant, the dashboard is essentially going to populate out an overview of that tenant productivity. So it's going to tell you your protected objects. If you have multiple Veeam Data Cloud products, it will also break down each one so you can see a broad overview of how those backups are running. And again, if you have multiple tenants, you can also break down by tenant. You can see a view of all tenants. It's going to give you that broad overview of your data and your backup. We then also have the activity log. So similar concept, you're going to have your backup sessions. The more products you have, the more backup sessions you're going to see. If you're just the M365, you'll see your M365 on here. And then your restore sessions. So that is going to audit and log any restore activity within your tenants. Finally, you've got your audit log. So the audit log is more Veeam based. So things like if a user logs into the platform, if a user deletes a backup policy, anything like that will be audited and it will be on this log, which will continue to build. So those audits are immutable. So going back into the overview page now. So where we're going to go to add that tenant is the Microsoft 365 block here. First thing you're going to see is subscription details. So you are going to be able to see your license users. Once your backups have run, how many licenses you're consuming compared to your licensed amount, and your expiration date for your contract as well. And what you're going to want to do is add tenant. So we'll click into the add tenant. You're going to set a tenant name, and then you're going to specify the region that you want your data to be located. So there's lots of regions. We do recommend that it's as close to your tenant as possible, just to avoid any latency or performance issues. So I'm just going to flick to another screen here just to show you, because unfortunately I do not have access to a global admin account, but I'm just going to show you in our user guide of what this will look like. So once you've chose those settings, you have then the ability to create those app registrations within your system. So it's an automated app registration. What you're going to do is come into the system, you're going to copy this code on this step 2, and you're going to follow the link. Once you've followed the link, it's going to ask you to input that code, and then it's going to ask you to log in. This is where you're going to need your global admin account. So once you log in with your global admin account, the permissions are going to pop up of what you want to accept. So read and write permissions for the backup and restore capabilities. Once accepted, it will create that enterprise app on your system. When it comes to the application registration, as Lydia mentioned earlier, there are some blockers we may face, one of them being conditional access policies. This is the step where you're going to see if that's going to block. So when it comes to the app registration, if you get to the stage where you've logged in with your global admin account and you get an error message that says something like, we can't access this right now, or you can't view this, you can't go any further, anything along those lines is an indicator that you have conditional access policies that are potentially blocking our system. At this point, we would recommend going into your sign-in logs in the Microsoft Admin Console. Check your sign-in logs. After a few minutes, that failed sign-in log should pull through. It will say Veeam Data Cloud registration. It will have a clear indicator of a failure, and you'll be able to go in and see what that failure is, if that has been caused by a specific conditional access policy. One we do see quite often is the Microsoft block device code flow. That one does tend to block our application registration. So this time where we usually say check with your internal teams just to make sure how you want to proceed when we hit, or if we hit, those conditional access policies. Once completed, you'll get a lovely little message that says this registration has now been completed. Please close this window. At that point, you're going to come back into Veeam and you're going to hit next. And that is then going to provision your account. Once the account is provisioned is where we get to that backup space. So coming down to configuration, and this is where we'll take into account things like that insight report that you've pulled, or when you've checked your admin console for your usage, looking at how many users you've got. We want to specify at that point how we're going to configure those backups. So the first option is create backups for the entire tenancy. So if your goal is to back up all users within your organization, you are a smaller organization, you don't have too many users, too much data, then absolutely would recommend using the entire tenancy. And that is essentially going to back up all of your mailboxes, archive mailbox, OneDrive, SharePoint, and your Teams channels. What you can then do here is specify your retention. So keep in line with the retention being obviously unlimited storage with Veeam Data Cloud. We do have a fair use policy that we can share out, but essentially here you can specify the retention of how long you want to keep your data for. It can be a number of years, or it can be a number of days as well. Below it will then just tell you a little bit about what you're going to be backing up. So essentially Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams. The other option here is manually create policies after onboarding. So this is what we'd recommend if you want to split those backups out a little bit more. So looking at application-based backups, so a backup for mailbox only or OneDrive only, if you have specific retention requirements, for example. At this point, you want to manually create those policies. It will give you a little bit more freedom in the configuration. For example, it's not going to be just a catch-all. You do have those options, but if you want to do group-based policies, you can choose a group and you can specify what application you want to back up with that group. So dependent on what you've chosen here, so either create for the entire organization or manually create policies after onboarding, we would hit next, and that is going to take you to the summary page. So on the summary page, it's going to give you an overview of essentially what you want to do. So the authorized account that you've used, the protected services region that you've specified for that data location, tenant name, and then what we're doing in terms of backup. So it'll either say that you've selected entire organization, or it will specify that you're going to manually create the policies after onboarding. So if I go back to my other screen now, so once we've done all that, you hit finish, you're going to have a provisioned account here. So sometimes your account may get stuck in a provisioning state, and give it a bit of time. It might just be that you've got a larger amount of users or data. If it does continue to be in a provisioning state, then feel free to raise a support case and we will be able to look into it for you. But most time you should be able to just click straight into your account. So here, a couple of ways you can then get into the tenant. So you can click the tenant name or the three little dots and it will get you to the same place. So if we click into the tenant here, the first thing that's going to pop up is your dashboard, and your dashboard is going to cover things like when your backups have completed, the protected accounts, it will tell you your flex only, so your breakdown of licensed users. It's going to tell you your backup storage within Veeam, so that will populate once your backups have completed. And then we have some Microsoft stats down here as well. So license activity, which is referring to your login activity for your Microsoft accounts. So you will see this probably spike up and down. Normally at weekends, it will be a lower capacity because that's when a lot of accounts will be logged down. You've then got Microsoft storage use as well. So that's going to tell you your overall data amount within your organization and your highest storage users as well. Just be aware with the highest storage users, it will take into account any SharePoint data if they're an owner of a site or a Teams channel. We'll take into account that data as well. You then finally on the dashboard have recent user activity. So you're going to be able to see your restore sessions here. So Lydia will go through this a little bit more on the reporting side later on, but it is essentially going to be an immutable log of your restore activity. So at this point, we're going to be in a position where we are creating backup policies. So if you have chose to do that entire tenancy automated backup, you'll see some backups pop up here already. So in that case, you would allow them to run, let them complete. Initial ingestion is always going to take a little bit longer because it's going to do that full backup. And then from that point, it's going to be an incremental run every 24 hours. But going into the backup policies, how we create them. So if we've gone down that manual creation route, we're going to go here and we're going to go and add new backup policy. So once we've got the policy information, we know what we're going to back up, we're going to give it a name. So in this case, say we're doing a test backup, going to be able to give it a policy name and then hit next. Again, you've got a couple of options. So you've still got that entire organization option. So even if you decide to do that later down the line, you can absolutely do that. Or in most cases, you're going to do backup following objects. So as I mentioned earlier, recommendation from us is usually to split by the application. So it will help with the run rates, the number of API calls, and Microsoft throttling, which is a big element to take into consideration when we're doing that initial ingestion. Few different ways we can configure those backups. So there's a couple of manual ways. So that would be selecting users, and you can upload a CSV into the system to do so. Same with SharePoint sites, you've still got that upload file option, and Teams channels. If we come into, for example, users, and we select users, that's going to be a manual configuration. You can select the users, you can select what objects and application you want to back up, but that will be manual. So if then later down the line you add a new user to your organization, you're going to have to come into Veeam, edit that configuration, add that user in. The ways we tend to recommend to do your backups is to keep it dynamic as possible. We want it to be automated. We want it to be simplistic. So the way to do that is using groups or partial organization settings. So groups is where you can specify a specific group within your intro environment. So you can come into here and search for a specific group. This little setting here is really helpful for if you've got a newly created group. So if you've created like a Veeam specific backup group, you want to come into here and toggle that on because that will pick up any newly created groups as well. Once you've then selected the group, you will see that it will automatically select all applications. So going back to what I said earlier around the splitting by application, you just want to deselect what you don't want in that specific backup. So for example, if we're doing a mailbox backup, we'll select mailbox and archive mailbox. If it's got group mailbox as well, we can select that group mailbox, just ensure the group has an owner to be able to pick that up. Once you've then selected what you want, you're going to click select, and then you could click create, and that would create that backup policy. So that would be group based. So if you're using groups, anyone added to that group automatically going to be backed up. Anyone removed from that group after 30 to 31 days, that license gets revoked within Veeam, and then you have that license free to use again for another user. When it comes to partial organization, so talking about the larger data amounts, but we still want sort of catch-alls, this is where you'll potentially use that group or partial organization because we want to split by application. So this essentially will mean that you are backing up the entire tenancy, but for a specific app. So for example, if we're doing mailboxes, we could do mail and archive, and that would pick up every active user. So every user in your Microsoft tenancy with an active license associated to them for their mailbox and archive. If there isn't, for example, a user, they don't have a license, it won't pick them up. But if they do have an active EF type, any sort of active license associated with them, it will pick them up. If you use the partial organization option for mailbox as well, it'll also pick up things like shared mailboxes. Shared mailboxes don't consume a license in Veeam, so it's one of our things that we can back up without any license consumption. However, just be aware if your shared mailboxes do hit that 50 gig threshold in Microsoft, where then they consume a license in Microsoft, at that point they will consume a license in Veeam as well. So once you've got everything configured, you're essentially going to hit create, and then those backups are going to run every 24 hours. So that is the default for the Flex. As I mentioned a bit earlier, first backups do take a little bit of time to complete, and that is completely normal for initial ingestion. We're obviously doing that first backup. The system's very much going to ingest that data and understand what data you've got to be able to get that backed up for you. So one thing, and Lydia will jump into this a little bit more again with the reports that we're going to talk about, but once your backups have been created, you can come in to the backup sessions. So to access those, you simply click the name of the backup or that particular line, and it will pull up the backup sessions. So you'll see these build as more backups complete, but what you'll see is essentially the protected objects, so how many objects are being protected, and the percentage of completion of that backup job. So it's something to keep an eye on once your backups are starting to run, to make sure that you're obviously getting that daily backup, that initial ingestion is going as expected, but also to see if there's any warnings. So again, Lydia will dive into these a little bit more for you. But what I do want to cover, just while we're still in this cloud.veeam system, is the settings. So once your backups have completed, that's where you're going to get some insights into how many licenses you're consuming. So first two tabs in your settings are very much around that license consumption. First tab is going to populate to a graph, and it'll tell you per day how many licenses you've consumed. The second tab is going to tell you a breakdown of all your users that are consuming a license. Within that, it's going to then tell you what's being protected for each. So for example, you can see here the top user, their mailbox is being protected, their archive mailbox isn't found, so that's probably likely they don't have it enabled, and then OneDrive and personal site. But you'll be able to easily identify if something is protected, not found, which means it's normally not enabled, or if it's not protected, it will be very red. And in that case, it's best to go and check those backup session logs to see if there's any particular warning or error associated with that user, which will indicate why they're not being backed up. We then have Microsoft 365. So on the Microsoft 365 tab, the first thing here is that Teams backup. So by default, when we've created a Teams backup, you have the channels, so both public and private, being backed up. Within those channels, we back up the document sites by default. So the backend SharePoint site of that channel, we back up the membership of the channel, we back up any tab. So if, for example, you have a OneNote connected to a tab, it'll back up that OneNote as well. What we don't back up is the physical post element of those, and you can enable it. You just need to come into settings and use your global admin account to essentially authorize that connection. So we back up that channel. So it's your Teams channel and that post element as well. So for example, if someone put hi in that channel, back up that element as well. Currently, we don't have any access to one-to-one chats or group chats. It would just be purely for those channels. Another thing you have in here is the reauthorize Veeam Data Cloud. So sometimes you might find that the system asks you to reauthorize for whatever reason, or the connection's broke in some way. If you ever get asked to reauthorize, this is where you're going to come to do it. Again, use a global admin account. The global admin account is essentially a one-off authorization, and then you'll be able to carry on as you was. We then have the Access tab. So the first thing in here is self-service. So self-service will allow users within the tenant to access Veeam Data Cloud. So they'll be able to log in with their Microsoft credentials, and that will give them access to restore their own OneDrive and Outlook data. So they won't be able to access anybody else's. They won't be able to access SharePoint or Teams. It would solely be OneDrive and Outlook, but they would have full access to restore their own data. By toggling the setting on, it will allow them to restore item level. If you want to allow them to do the entire Outlook or OneDrive, you just need to tick the tick box as well. And that will give them full access to then restore the entire item if needed. It's always going to be back to the original location, so it would go back into their mailbox, back into their OneDrive. They have no access to restore to different places. That does not allow and send out a bulk email if you do toggle on that setting. So users won't be aware that they have the access. If you get the request, you would share out the URL, so cloud.veeam.com, and then they would be able to log in just with their usual Microsoft credentials. Another thing in settings is the networking. So this is where you can restrict to a specific IP range. So if you use VPN or you work in an office, you want to restrict the login to this portal to a specific IP range, you would add your from and to IPs, and then as soon as you toggle on the setting where it says restrict Veeam Data Cloud access to specific IP, that would then stop anyone out of that range being able to log into the portal. And the final thing on here is the syslogs. So if you use syslog servers, you can add in your syslogs, and then at that point you will get the restore activity sent to those as well. Finally, we have notifications. So if you are an organization admin within the system, you will by default receive the notifications for Veeam Data Cloud. You will be able to log into the portal, come into settings, and you can manage your own preferences. By default, the email when backup completes is turned off. So if you do want to receive that email, make sure you come in and tick that on. But you can set your time zone, and then you can specify what notifications you want to receive. When it comes to then other email addresses, so if you have a service desk, if you have shared mailboxes, anywhere else you want them to go, you can add in additional email recipients here. So you'll just add the email, and then you can tick on and off what notifications you want them to receive. Another cool feature we've got here is the Teams channel notifications. So you can come into here, you can add a Teams channel, and then again, specify what notifications you want to receive. The emails come from a noreply@mail.cloud.veeam.com email address. So just make sure you're able to receive those notifications if you get them. So that is covering the backup policies, obviously connecting your tenant, bit of the settings and overview of cloud.veeam. I'm going to pass you back over to Lydia, who is then going to cover the reporting side of things and then how you would restore your data as well. Lydia, over to you.
Thank you. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Okay, so once you have some data ingested within your tenant, it's time to go and do some test restores or some restores for real. So once you go to restores on the left-hand side, just underneath backup policies over here, we're going to go over to Outlook for today's session. But on the left-hand side, you do have your users over here. You've got a list of all your users within your Microsoft environment. I'm just going to pick on Miriam over here. And as you can see, once I click on Miriam's mailbox, I can go ahead and restore the entire selected mailbox. I can also click on her mailbox and all her folders will open up. So if I click on inbox, for example, again, the restore changes to restore selected folder. And within the inbox folder, we can see that Miriam has got a couple of emails over here. So if I wanted to, I could click on the emails and restore these selected items. One cool thing that I personally like, and I know most of our customers like as well, is the fact that we are able to see more details of this email, particularly being able to see the email body. Now, if you guys wanted to, through role-based access control that Chelsea just went over, you can, of course, give this functionality to specific users. But if you wanted this functionality to not be available within, your tenant, you can log a support ticket via cloud.veeam.com, my.veeam.com, and the support team will be able to disable this functionality for your entire tenancy. And as you guys can see, the email body is now available for me to see. I can go through it, read it, and have a look at it. Okay. Now let's go through a restore session. We're just going to click on restore selected item. Okay, and we get presented with the following options. Restore the item back to its original location, in this case, back to the inbox. And if you're doing some testing and you haven't deleted this item, you've got some advanced options over here where you can mark this item that you're restoring from Veeam Data Cloud as a changed item, as a missing item, as a restored item. And that way it's easy for you to know which item was already there and which item was restored into the inbox. The other option, which a lot of customers like, again, is the ability to restore to another user's mailbox. Now you can click on select users and you can search for users within your Microsoft environment, and you can restore this item, a mailbox, a folder to another user's mailbox. Another thing that you can do is specify a folder. So if you want this item to go to a specific folder, you can put the name of that specific folder. If the folder doesn't exist, you can just type in restore and it will create this folder for you within that mailbox. And a misconception that we sometimes have is the fact that over here, it has to be a different user compared to the user you are restoring from. No, I can just click over here and select Miriam if I wanted to as well. Okay, it'll just go into her mailbox, but it will create a different folder. And again, of course, you have the advanced options to mark the item as changed, missing, or as a restored item. The other option, which again, Chelsea covered under the role-based access control, is being able to do a download in the background. Again, if you didn't want all your users to have access to do a download in the background, you can just remove it when creating that specific role. But if you do click on download in the background, basically, and you click on download, it will do a download in the background within Veeam Data Cloud, and within notifications over here on the left-hand side, you will be able to access that downloaded data. Good stuff. Another thing which I wanted to show you guys is if I go under activity over here on the left-hand side, seeing that I have just viewed the email body of an item, this activity, whether you're looking at an email, whether you're restoring, whether you're creating a restore session, this information is available within the activity. Okay, so you can see lydia.ion@veeam.com, the action that I've done, viewed an email body, the object, we can see Miriam's inbox, the time, the date, everything's logged. And if I just click on view details, it gives me some more logs as well. Okay, as Chelsea said, these activities within Veeam Data Cloud, they are immutable, so they will be available here. They cannot be deleted. Okay, good. Going back though, just quickly to backup policies. So once you guys create your backup policies, it's good to familiarize yourselves with the backup logs. Okay, and if I just click on a policy over here that I have created, I can see my session logs just at the bottom. Okay, you can see the start time, the end time, the status of that backup policy. But one thing you can do, right, if you do see that let's see, do I have any? Yes, if you do see that you've got a partial success and you want to see why you don't have a success on your policy, you can just click on that policy and have a look at the session logs. Once you click on the session log, you can click on detail and it will give you more details about this backup policy. It will give you information on the session logs. If you want to be able to see the full message of those errors, those warnings, you can download the session logs to a CSV file and it will give you the full picture of those warnings or those errors. Now, when you do download the logs, it will give you all the logs within this session log, okay, within this backup policy. So one thing you can do is, of course, filter it out and either look for your warnings or for your errors, whatever you want to look for. There are some very common warnings that you can get, especially for that first backup run, because Microsoft would throttle the data. And those are your 429 warnings or errors, but these are normally just for the first or maybe even for the second backup run. They will cancel themselves out. Okay, and other warnings that you guys might get is we can't protect this user because they don't have a valid Microsoft license. This basically means that the user does not have a license within the Microsoft environment. Therefore, we cannot protect that user. Okay, good. Now, let's go over to reports, because being able to schedule reports is very important for our customers. Now, customers typically like to schedule the user protection report, the restore activity report, and the backup summary report. But again, you guys can decide to schedule whatever reports you want. But within the generate option over here, if I go down and click on generate report, it will just generate an immediate report that I can access through notifications. Okay, and if I wanted to schedule a report, I could just click on schedule. You can see here there's already a scheduled report for a monthly summary. And I'm just going to click on schedule report. I can choose my report type, whether it's a user protection report, a restore activity report, whatever I want. I can give it a name and then click on next. So you can then choose your frequency. You know, if you want your reports to be daily, that's very uncommon. But if you did want that, you can. You can schedule them weekly on specific days as well. Or you can do monthly reports and you can select the months that you want these reports to be scheduled in. And you can also select specific days or specific on specific dates. So on the 1st of the Monday, on the 2nd of the Monday, etc. Okay, once you click on next, you then choose your recipients. Once you choose your recipients, it'll give you a summary. Click on finish, and then your reports will be scheduled. Good stuff. So, as I said previously, if you do decide to generate a report, okay, and if you click on generate, for example, it will be made available within notifications over here on the left-hand side. So if you do generate one, it will be made available here, and you can just click on that report, or if you did a download in the background, and you will be able to access the data over here. At the bottom, you've got some logs as well that you can look through, and also at the top here as well. Okay, good stuff. Okay, so let's now go into our search functionality. So Veeam Data Cloud does offer the ability to search within your backed up data within Veeam Data Cloud. And basically, we have a basic search that you can search, within Outlook, OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams. You can select the user that you want to search within. And if you want to go to a specific point in time, you can also choose the restore point. But typically, you would type something within here, like restore or Veeam. You would click on search, and then it will begin to search within Miriam's Outlook. Okay. The advanced search, though, is where it's a bit more in depth, and you can choose here, for example, again, to search within Outlook, OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams. You can again select your user and your restore point. If you want to go back in time, again, you can. And you've got a primary search criteria that you can select from. And again, you can select the from address if you wanted to, the sender address. You can also do that. You can say, okay, it contains this specific value, and you're able to add that through your search. And you can also do that with a secondary search as well. And again, you can say, okay, I want to search within the email body because I know what it contains. And again, you can search for Veeam or whatever keywords you want to do. Add it to the list, and the search will begin. Okay, good. So Veeam Data Cloud ensures that you always have a copy of your data from your Microsoft environment, and it makes sure that you can recover it if it's lost, if it's deleted, or even corrupted. However, if your organization needs capabilities to search, place legal holds, or manage compliance investigations, you should use a dedicated e-discovery solutions, because Veeam Data Cloud is not designed for those purposes. Okay, and just to quickly go over the recap, in today's session, we have gone over the activation of your tenant, so accessing Veeam Data Cloud through cloud.veeam.com and doing that app registration. We've covered configuration, so job configuration, role-based access control, looking through your backup jobs, etc. And we've also done some enablement, such as performing restores, looking at notifications, setting up reports, and going over license considerations as well. Good. Okay, so you can also access our Veeam Data Cloud onboarding toolkit. And for any additional Veeam Data Cloud onboarding resources, please have a look and take a look at the QR code that we have over here on screen. This will take you to additional onboarding resources in our community hub to help and guide you through your VDC journey.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lydia and Chelsea. I am hoping this was very helpful for all of you. So if it was, please let us know. And again, if not, if there's questions right now, we've actually still got some time allocated to go through some specific questions that might have just popped up now. We do recognize there's quite a bit of new information that's coming through during this call. So now's a great chance to do it. I did see a few different questions coming through the Q&A. So thank you for sending those already. There's also some really good resources that are dropped into the chat page. So great things to be able to bookmark as you kind of go and start getting ready to move forward. And these will help you as we put together some of those quick start guides, even within the user guide itself. So any questions right now? You do have the ability to unmute. You're also welcome to drop them in the chat if you have any that you'd like to go over before Lydia and Chelsea sign off for the day. I see one question just came in. It said, is there an option to configure retention policies? Oh, thank you for switching. Lydia, I'll turn it over to you here. Any options to configure retention policies? And as you go to answer that, the QR code should now be on the screen for that onboarding toolkit as well.
So normally when you go to set up your tenant and you've done your app registration, you are able to select your retention policies just before you go ahead to configure some backup jobs. If you've gone ahead and you did not configure, you've selected to manually set up your policies and you did not configure your retention policies, it will default to a 1-year retention policy. If you do need assistance with multiple retention periods, please log a support ticket on my.veeam.com and we will be able to enable the functionality for you to add additional repositories within your tenant, and therefore you should be able to add more retention policies.
Thanks, Lydia. I'm doing a quick scan here. I don't see any other new ones that popped up quite yet. Oh, we did just get one. I just downloaded a user protection report and I see unprotected with restore points.
Okay, so if you do have any users with unprotected with restore points, it basically means that those users have been removed from the backup job, but their data, of course, remains within Veeam Data Cloud, and you're able to browse and restore that data.
Perfect. And then we've got a question on how do we remove an account from being backed up?
So the way that you remove an account from being backed up is by going into your policies, your backup policies, editing those policies and just removing the user. Typically, the license assigned to that user within Veeam Data Cloud will be revoked after 31 days. And of course, the data again will stay for the retention period that you guys have chosen when onboarding.
Perfect. We've got another question coming in. You mentioned that backups run every 24 hours. May I ask what the default start time of the backup cycle is?
So the default cycle at the moment, when you guys configure your backup policies, that is when your backup jobs will start. So if you've started them, if you've configured your policies at 11 o'clock today, then your policies will start at 11 o'clock every day. And sometimes what the system does is that it allocates the start times of your backup jobs automatically as well.
Thanks, Lydia. Good questions here. I don't see any other new ones. We'll give it another minute as we wait, but you will see a quick survey on your way out of this as well. So again, if there's any suggestions or ideas that you'd like to see for future webinars, just so you know, this is always evolving. We're always adding more. So if there's specific things you want to see highlighted or things that would be helpful as you kind of get started with your VDC journey, please use that as your forum to get in touch with us. We'd love to hear your feedback. We will keep this open for just another minute here to see if there's any other questions. But please feel free to either unmute yourself or just drop them in there. Well, Chelsea and Lydia, you might be off the hook. It looks like you've answered everyone's question during the session itself. So thank you both very much. Fantastic job. And we will be in touch with everybody soon. If you need anything in the meantime, like I said, please use that survey right at the end. Otherwise, use that onboarding toolkit there where you'll also see our email inbox. So with that, we'll close it off. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. Take care. Talk to you all soon.